So obviously not everybody, practices, any kind of like spirituality. Sometimes, there's a lot of people, understandably so, that just don't believe in that kind of mindset, right?
Yeah.
Um, for when you're coaching people from a mental health standpoint,
Mhm.
is that a requirement, or like how do you integrate that, if you do, with people
Mhm.
that don't necessarily, you know, follow that kind of mindset with their life?
Well, even if they're not religious at all, there's so
Hmm.
much scientific data now that backs up a lifestyle of meditation, a
Hmm.
lifestyle of service and selflessness and forgiveness. Like
Hmm.
you can ask anybody. It doesn't have to be a religious leader, it can be a scientist, and
Hmm.
they will tell you the same thing. Well, if you do some public service, if you learn how to forgive, if you learn how to have mindfulness, live in the moment, meditate, it will affect your life positively.
Yeah.
And it's hard because it's like, it's so funny because the scientists that prove that, okay, religious community actually makes people happier don't necessarily choose it for themselves. And that's
Hmm.
fair. Like, but that's what the beauty of it. Like, no one is saying you have to do this.
Hmm.
They're saying, well, just try to be open
Right.
and
Right.
find out what really helps you to grow and
Hmm.
heal and feel happier and more whole as a person. And
Right.
and for me, I found a lot of that through just full on commitment to a non-conforming but real religion,
Right.
and not a religion that's based on rules, but according to the Bible, it actually says true religion is caring for the widow and the orphan.
Hmm.
So that's what I'm signed up for, is being
Right.
there for
Right.
people who need me.
That makes sense. So it sounds like that there are obviously like common misconceptions when it comes to spirituality and its connection to mental health. What are some of those kind of like misconceptions that you think people should understand in this conversation?
The benefits of spirituality are not about taking 2 hours on a Sunday to go to a church service.
Right.
That is actually little to no benefit.
Yeah.
If you're literally just going to go for 2 hours and then leave, or go for 1 hour, then leave, that's just a club.
Mhm.
If you're not connected with those people, like actually knowing them, or you're not actually interested in what they're teaching about, it has absolutely no value to you.
Mhm. Right.
So,
Right.
like, please don't hear me saying that.
Hmm. Right. Hmm.
But I do think figuring out who you are and what you believe and what you value is incredibly important. So I
Hmm.
think it's more important that you figure out what you think and what you value than just adhering to some tradition that somebody did, like your parent or your grandparent. That's
Hmm.
not real, it's not authentic, and it's not even you. So I'd say
Right.
before you jump into something, figure out, okay, what do I value and what aligns with these values and what can help me grow as a whole person.
Hmm. Right. So I know that there's definitely a lot of people that feel hurt by religion, right? Like understandably so. They've either had a bad experience, on the religious side of things, and or they just simply feel as though it's like forced upon them, maybe, for there's a variety of reasons there. Um, what would you say to them that are listening right now?
Yeah.
Like what words would you have for them, as they, because I understandably so I can see why people have trauma from the religious side of things. I can use myself as an example, right? So I went to Christian school from preschool through fourth grade, and it was towards the end, it was a very traumatic experience for me, and it made me like kind of like turn my back, in a way. And I've gotten way better now, obviously, but like there's a lot of people out there that understandably so just think that like, no, that's not for me. What would you
Yeah.
say to them right now?
Well, I would say to be careful not to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Like,
Mm,
there are humans who have done this the wrong way. And that's going to be true in every organization. Like, so many companies are the same way, but we hold a higher standard to religious leaders because we expect
mhm,
them to be better than that, and that's understandable. But
mhm,
it's just making sure, okay, well, I reject that community because these people were toxic,
mhm,
dishonest, manipulative, and that's all fair. but you have to be careful to disconnect that from faith itself.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, like how much of that are you going to attribute to the person versus the reality of what faith really is?
Sure,
So
sure.
I say when people are hurt by the church, it's completely valid. And there's probably real things that those people really did that they need to own up to.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I'd say, why are you going to church in the first place? Is it because you really looked up to these people and you're following them? Because for me personally, that wouldn't be a good reason for me. That wouldn't be a good reason for me to be a part of a religious community.
Mm-hmm.
What I ask is this community helping me to grow as a person and in kindness, in goodness, and gentleness, in faithfulness, in self-control? If it's not helping me grow as a person or in my faith, then
Mm-hmm.
that's not a community I want to be a part of.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about coping mechanisms here because I know that we all have some healthy ones, some unhealthy ones in that regard. Where does spirituality come into play when it comes to coping mechanisms, especially when you're going through rough times? Like for example, I am diagnosed with severe depression and generalized anxiety disorder. I have my good days, I have my not so good days, right? And I have my coping mechanisms that I use to try to manage that and to work my way through. Where does spirituality come into play when it comes to coping mechanisms?
I think that it's far more effective to if it's more encompassing than just a coping mechanism, if that makes sense. So if I'm like, okay, I'm going to pray to make myself feel better, but I don't
Mm-hmm.
actually have any faith behind that, that's probably not going to be effective. But if you're like, okay, I'm open spiritually, I think there is another awareness, another part of me that I want to discover,
Mm-hmm.
then that's probably going to be healthier. Like, okay, maybe there's a third eye. Maybe there's a spiritual awareness here that I'm kind of feeling or experiencing. I would say to continue to seek and be a seeker.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the real toxicity in religion comes when we think we have it all figured out. And,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I have all the answers. I actually know everything.
Right.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
when it is toxic and can cause trauma. So I'll be the first one to admit that every experience I have has taught me where I am today, and I'm always seeking.
Mm-hmm.
And there are incredible religious experiences that you can have in the depth of depression where
Mm-hmm.
you're even more open to yourself emotionally than you would have been had you been guarded and busy.
Right. Right.
So when you actually slow down and you're depressed, it's strangely an incredible opportunity to open up to that spiritual side of yourself and probably be more creative,
Mm-hmm.
even in your pain, probably open up to a new dimension of yourself that you didn't even know existed,
Mm-hmm.
and depth, come to another depth in your own reality.